Want to talk more about election complaints? So let's bring in Trey Trainor, Republican Commissioner on the Federal Election Commission, to talk more about that portion of it. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Well, first off, I want to start by going back to basics. Can you overall explain the role of the Federal Election Commission and what you all do?
Sure. So the Federal Election Commission is made up of 6 commissioners, all appointed by the president and confirmed by the Senate. And we're responsible for regulating the money that's spent in our elections. So campaign finance regulation is our primary responsibility. We also have some responsibility over the funds, the matching funds that are used in presidential campaigns, and how those monies are doled out throughout the election process.
And I know you can't talk about specific complaints, but speaking kind of generally, what kind of complaints do you guys get?
Well, we get all sorts of complaints. There's only certain ones that we have jurisdiction over, but we get complaints on everything from how elections are conducted to what happens on, the most recent snafu over FCC regulations related to, Saturday Night Live appearances. We get complaints like that. The complaints that we have jurisdiction over, however, are those that relate to how money is spent in politics, typically around how advertisements are done and whether or not they're deceptive, and whether or not the money was spent properly, and whether or not it was reported properly for the public to know how that money is being spent. So we deal with all of those things. We deal with a lot of foreign interference and money and foreign interference in the elections. We've seen complaints related to that in past elections, whether it be from Russia, China, all of the various nations that people complain about playing in our election process. We see complaints of those because they all relate to how money's being spent in the political process.
Do you think people have maybe a misconception of what the FEC is compared to maybe the FCC or other organizations?
Oh, absolutely. I think they have a misconception of that. I mean, the name in and of itself, the Federal Election Commission, would lead you to believe that we deal specifically with how elections are conducted. And what we need to remember is that in our republic, elections are conducted by the states. The Constitution gives the specific authority of how to run the elections to the states. So there's very little federal regulation that goes into the process. In fact, most of what comes down from the federal government for the conduct of elections is really guidance to states and best practices to the states with regard to how to conduct their elections. So most of the complaints that people will have about the process today in the election on election day would be one of complaining to whether it be secretaries of state or attorneys general for the 50 states in order to get those type of complaints answered.
As far as the number of complaints, again, I know you can't go into specifics about a lot of the specific complaints, but how has, I guess, this election cycle compared to previous election cycles? Can you kind of delve into that?
Sure. So there's been an uptick in the number of complaints that we've seen this cycle compared to last. Now, obviously, it's a presidential cycle, so people pay more attention to what's going on. And we do, in presidential election cycles, see more activity at the Federal Election Commission than we would do in, say, in the off-year midterm elections. But we've seen an uptick. What we've seen a lot happening in politics these days is that the presidential campaigns in particular, but even the congressional and Senate campaigns, are being fueled primarily through low dollar donors. So those would be donors who donate $200 or less to the process. And the regulations don't have the same rigorous requirements for reporting those type of donations as they do for those that donate over $200. And so we see a lot of complaints that come in about people say that they're not seeing as much disclosure in the money that's coming into the process. And so, and a lot of that is being fueled by the fact that there are low dollar donors. We hear a lot about dark money and big money donors being the problem with the process. And I actually see the opposite happening. I see low dollar donors as driving the process more than anything else. Candidates have become very good at asking for that $10, $15, $20 donation, and people have been very receptive to that. I know most people are probably tired of it by now, but they're getting text messages and emails like crazy asking for those donations. And it's been a very effective fundraising strategy. And not that money in politics is a problem, because it's not. It's just that that's where we see the money coming from mostly, as low dollar donors.
My last question for you: when should people go about lodging a complaint with the commission? And more importantly, how do people go about doing that?
Well, they should lodge a complaint with the commission when they genuinely see a problem in the process with how money is being spent in campaigns, and they should do that with actual knowledge of what's happening. One of the things that I get frustrated with the most in my job is just complaints that are filed based upon mere innuendo or hearsay, and people don't actually have knowledge of what they're filing a complaint. It makes it very hard for us to do our job, because we do have to open an investigation, and we spend time and taxpayer resources to go investigate something, and ultimately there not be anything there. So if they actually see something or know that money is being improperly spent, file a complaint. It's very easy to do. You can go to fec.gov. There's a complaint process outlined on there. There's forms that people can fill out. And they do have to swear to the information that they're submitting to us, saying that they believe it to be true.
All right, Trey Trainor, thank you so much for taking the time to join us and break it all down. Anything else you want to add before I let you go?
No, Josh, it's just so important for people to participate in the political process. I'm glad to be a small part of that in dealing with the money that's spent in politics and people exercising their First Amendment rights. And thank you for taking the time to highlight it today.
Of course. Thank you again. And I know it's going to be busy, so we appreciate you being here.
Absolutely. Thank you, Josh.